What's going on, Broncos country? And this is an exciting episode. It's been a long off season up until the draft. I'm joined here with Frankie Abbott at Frankie Films and Zach Seegers. Zach, Frankie, how are we feeling about the draft? I'm excited about this. Let's start off with the first pick. The Broncos trade up, right? They trade right into it, and they draft Marvin Mims, wide receiver, Oklahoma. I'm going to start with Zach. Zach, how do you feel about the Marvin Mims pick?
I like this one. Like my immediate reaction is like a solid B. You guys can hear me, right? I was doing a little mic switch.
You sound
to
great.
make sure that's coming through.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Love it. I like this one. I see some Broncos fans are low on it. I just think at this point the KJ Hamler pick hasn't worked out. I don't know why KJ Hamler really got a level of grace that Judy never did. It was like everyone was calling Judy a bust before last season, and yet it feels we're still kind of scared to say the same thing about KJ Hamler, even though KJ Hamler's been far less productive. I just think, unfortunately, it looks like the KJ Hamler experiment isn't going to work out. I think he's a really talented player, but just with his body type and injuries, I just don't think it's going to work out. I think Marvin Mims replaces that role in the offense, and they needed it. Both of the last two, honestly, 3 seasons, whenever KJ Hamler exited the lineup because of injury, the offense became pretty stagnant. It lost its speed. It lost its ability to stretch and threaten defenses vertically. And they got a lot more compacted looks as a result. That's going to hurt the run game. That's going to hurt your ability to work the short intermediate parts of the field. And it's honestly also going to hurt your ability to attack deep because you don't have the guys to do it. This also pairs brilliantly with Russell Wilson, a great deep ball thrower. I think it might be like a slight reach, and wide receiver is not the biggest need. So I feel like a B-ish, B plus, maybe B minus. I'm in that B range right now, but I like the pick.
Okay.
I'm probably slightly more negative, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that they moved up. I like Marvin Williams as a player. Like Zach said, he brings a role to the offense that they desperately needed. They need a guy that can make bigger plays, whether it's from catching the ball short and taking it deeper, kind of just beating a guy over the top. But my issue really comes with the fact that this team had 5 draft selection and used one to bump up 5 spots. When I think when you look at the current receivers that were still on the board, I don't know that they necessarily had to do that. You make that move and you go up and get Marvin Mims, and then 10 picks later, you watch Jalen Hyatt go off the board, who I'd say those are very comparable talents when you talk about just having a deep burner threat. So I don't think they necessarily had to burn the extra 4th or 5th round pick. As Zach also said, it seems like it just definitely is a slight, not a slight, but, it goes against KJ Hamler. This isn't the Sutton replacement I think a lot of us were expecting, or the possible Jerry Jeudy replacement. This does seem like purely that deep burner vertical threat that is going to be kind of trying to take away snaps from KJ Hamler, Montrell Washington, those types of guys. But like I said, I don't hate it. I like the player. I just wish that in a year where they don't necessarily have so much capital, they weren't kind of, I don't want to say wasting, but it feels a little bit like wasting when you look at some of the receivers that were able to fall. You look at Tank Dell, who just went into the second or in the 3rd round. You look at Cedric Tillman. You look at guys like Jalen Hyatt. Not that these are all the same type of receiver, but some of them are fairly similar. And I think when you talk about the risk you're giving up, only having 5 selections, and this roster needs to get better. Like, I guess that's what concerns me, is it feels like another year where this team is kind of going through the motions, not really trying to make vast improvements. And it's like, this team is a 5-12 team that just, I don't think added what I would say are year 1 difference makers, but it is the 3rd round. You're kind of taking what you can get at that point. What are your thoughts on Mims, Joey?
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't hate this pick at all. I don't. I am curious about if this means anything for any of the other wide receivers in the room. And then, we're going to talk about the next pick, Drew Sanders, here in a little bit. And I mean, how much of an impact can he have? If you have all of these guys and they're all staying, how much of an impact do you actually expect Marvin Mims is going to have in the future? If you're saying Courtland Sutton, Tim Patrick, and Jerry Jeudy are our big 3, we're throwing Marvin Mims in there. That's cool. I like having 4 really good wide receivers. But what does the production look like for all of them, especially with the struggling Russell Wilson? You made this whole deal about, hey, we're going to run the football this year, and now we're 4 deep at wide receiver. So me personally, I think that this is an indication that we are comfortable moving off of somebody need be. That's honestly what I think it is. And I'm curious if you guys share that opinion. Do you guys think that now it's scary for one of these receivers out here? Could they be dealt? Is this lean in more to that?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say for both the picks, honestly, I think both the picks just kind of feel more like insurance for next year than they do feel like reinforcements for this year. I mean, you talk about a guy like Marvin Mims, it feels like he's kind of the eventual KJ Hamler, Jerry Jeudy, they're possible a little bit of an option at receiver. And I think the same thing about Drew Sanders when you talk about he's probably going to be behind Josie Jewell and Alex Singleton this season. I'm not saying that they can't be effective this year, and I'm not going to be shocked if they are, but I'm saying these picks definitely kind of weigh more in the mindset that I don't see this team necessarily going for like really trying to turn it all around this season necessarily, which I think is the right decision by them. I think we would have seen them be more aggressive to try to move up for a center. That is one thing that really bites about this is that they clearly were willing to move up, and we watched the Giants take John Michael Schmitz, someone they'd been heavily linked to for the entire draft cycle. So, I mean, I think it's not the pick itself isn't bad. I feel like it's just kind of the missed opportunity and the real like situation that it all kind of comes about in where, this just doesn't feel like it necessarily fills a hole that was majorly missing. They needed a deep threat, but the offense as a whole last season had so many more issues outside of that, in my opinion.
I don't know. I think if you're going to maximize Russell Wilson, you need a guy like this in the offense. And I do think he's going to immediately contribute this year. I don't think a Courtland Sutton trade is off the table. I think that's still a possibility. I think it's unlikely totally, but I wouldn't say it's off the table, especially after this pick. Even as your number 4 wide receiver, like teams need 4, 5, 6 good pass catchers nowadays, especially with injuries and whatnot. I think he's going to see good playing time. And what I think we've seen from what Sean Payton's building is he's kind of like throwing it back to the pre-let Russ cook days. He wants that like smash mouth offense, and then he's going to throw bombs over the top. And I think the one piece of that vision that was kind of missing was this true vertical speed threat. And I like it. Maybe you go with Hyatt, but Hyatt's such a weird projection to the NFL that I don't mind preferring Mims over him. It's fine. And I guess we should talk about the trade compensation. The trade up is the part that I have more issue with because you're investing a good bit there. Or you're just investing extra. You dropped 50 spots to move up like 5 or something. And yes, it's a few rounds later.
Take a vertical threat at receiver, who there are many of in this draft. I think that's kind of the big thing too. That's a good point. That's what this class wasn't lacking in. It kind of lacked in the bigger outside guys that you'd want to see replace Sutton. As far as those, I don't want to say smaller because I think Mims actually has some decent like weight to him, but not decent, but like it's not like it's like a 170, 160 guy flying out down there. But like it just didn't feel like it was essential for them to try to move up. Side note, Marte Mapu just went 76 to the Patriots, and I'm a huge Marte Mapu guy, and I like him going top 100 is so freaking cool, guys. Like draft season's the best. Seeing players like that end up that's so cool, man. That guy didn't even get a combine invite, just showed up at the Senior Bowl and is now a top 75 selection. That's absolutely awesome. Just had to mention that.
I do have to say this though, guys, about Marvin Mims. I agree that there probably are some guys that are going to end up being good later that fill a similar need or whatever the case may be. But I do think that you're getting like around Marvin Mims' value of where I projected him to go in this. The trade up, it's not the best. I would have rather have just not have traded up and got him, obviously. But I don't hate this. I don't hate it. But I do have to say a guarantee. Everything this entire offseason has told me that the Broncos are going to go in and try. Zach said it, the pre-Russ Cook days. Going 4 deep at wide receiver doesn't go with that. I don't think it goes hand in hand, especially when you're looking at the investments in everything. You paid Tim Patrick, you paid Courtland Sutton, you paid or you drafted Jerry Jeudy with the first, and now you drafted Marvin Mims with the third. I think I'm going to guarantee this. I think that one of the receivers will be traded by the deadline. That's just how I'm feeling now after that pick.
I could see it. I guess my issue, and I agree with that, Joey, I do like this pick. I think my biggest frustration is the guys they could have had. I think Darnell Washington would also be like perfect and is like a first round talent for Sean Payton's system. The fact he's fine, I think teams got to know something we don't. That one kind of frustrates me. And then there's the other one, DeJuan Jones, who I thought both of you really liked. But I think that's an awesome developmental tackle to stash behind Bulls for a year. And then you have your heir apparent there. The fact that George Payton continues to not like invest draft capital at tackle has been really frustrating. It's the reason I think they had to spend big money on like a kind of mediocre tackle this offseason. And they might be in the exact same position next offseason because they passed up this golden opportunity to draft an heir apparent. And they didn't even have to do it with this pick. They could have done it with their next one.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I get it. There's always going to be, we'll see. I do have to throw out there was a, someone tweeted this. Let me pull it up real quick. It was Sean Payton has drafted these guys, these wide receivers with his, in the top 2 rounds, and it was pretty impressive. Let's see. Wide receivers drafted in the first 2 rounds for Sean Payton's team since he has become a head coach. 2007, Robert Meacham, 2014, Brandon Cooks, 2016, Michael Thomas, and now 2023, Marvin Mims. So I think he might have a good eye for wide receiver there. I'm hoping it works out. I think the Broncos got pretty good value. The trade up, I understand if you have an issue with that. And I think that's why both Frankie and Zach are a little more hesitant about it. I think that if they stayed back and drafted Marvin Mims, the conversation with you guys would be a little different. I'm a little more positive about it, but hey, we'll move on to the next one.
I'm giving it a B. I'm not that down on it. I'm giving it a B.
You're giving it a B? Okay.
I'm a solid like C+. It's like a 77.
Hey.
Like a literal 77%. You're happy with that grade, but you're still sitting like you might get a little scolded when you get home if it was like an easy test or something. Who knows?
And in terms of value, Brugler had him ranked as the 76th overall player. DJ had him as the 59th overall player. I just put these notes together for our graphic. And then last season at Oklahoma, he averaged 20.4 yards per reception, just to demonstrate what he's bringing to the offense.
Sorry, one other last thing. Another receiver they could have waited who just went just now to the Colts is Josh Downs. Josh Downs is another example of a smaller
Cedric Tillman's still available, right? I mean, a different type of receiver, but that's a receiver
right.
I love.
That I guess that's my main gripe with it is there's so many guys that like again, if you were willing to move up to go get him at 65, I don't know, or whatever pick it ended up being, I'm sorry. I don't know why you wouldn't just sit until 67 and take someone like Jalen Hyatt unless you really don't believe in him compared to Marvin Mims. But like, I don't know, man. I don't know how, like, from what I've seen on their tape, I don't know if there's really that big of a differentiation that I'd be like, man, let's give up one of our 5 picks. But, it is, or drop down 50 selections. But, whatever.
Cool. Well, let's move on to the next one here. I don't want to spend too much time. Quick reactions here. In the 3rd round, pick 67, the Broncos selected Drew Sanders from the linebacker from Arkansas. And I know we're kind of different on this. Bill said that Cedric Tillman just went to Cleveland at pick 74. That's a fantastic pick. But yeah, guys, I know that we're going to have differing opinions here. You guys are really hard on this pick, so I'm curious as to your reasons. And we'll start off with Frankie this time since we started off with Zach last time.
It has nothing to do with Drew Sanders, the player. It's really just how Denver has been able to get value out of their off-ball linebacker position in the last couple of years, them seeing the success in doing that, them already being too deep. There's there's really just so much of it. And it's another one of those picks where it's like, I'm even forgetting about Jonas Griffith. Like, it's genuinely kind of mind-boggling, and I don't truly understand it. And then, like, I'm seeing a lot of people factor in that, like, he has this pass rush upside, all this stuff. Guys, guess what? Josie Jewell, Alex Singleton, and Jonas Griffith are also really good interior pass rushers. And as far as, like, maybe he'll pull up Aaron Browning and move out to edge. I'm not really trying to have multiple off-ball linebackers trying to learn the edge position in the same season, if that's really what people think is going to happen. It doesn't really feng shui with me. This is, again, and I'm going to keep saying it, this is a 5-12 football team and has been around that range for like 7 years now. These moves that they're making right now are not the moves that are going to improve them. And I get it. It's a 3rd-round pick. You want to take the best player on your board. All of that is all well and good. But if you were to ask any Broncos fan a week ago what's like the strongest position on the roster, maybe top 2 strongest positions, one of their answers is probably off-ball linebacker because we know who both of the starters are and they have a depth piece behind it. You really can't say that for any other position. And when you talk about there are corners on the board I still really like, and they're weak at corner. They have some of the worst offensive line depth in the league right now, in the league. And they passed on all of those guys. This team does not have another top 100 selection. So when you're talking about like, this team might be able to add some guys later on day 3, it's more so about, I think, the guys that you're kind of more sure are going to be hits. And I'd rather, if you're going to take something you're a little bit more certain on, make it an offensive lineman, make it a defensive back, make it one of these positions that costs a ton of money. Because Zach was talking about this, we were talking about this earlier, when it's like, when you're drafting a running back early and they ended up working out, you're saving yourself like $8 million versus paying like a top end running back. When you're doing a linebacker, it's kind of the same argument, where having a really great rookie linebacker versus like a paid linebacker, you're really not saving yourself that much money. But when you look at positions like offensive line, corner, receiver, quarterback, those positions, when you have a guy on a rookie deal versus one of the like average or top contracts in the league, you're saving like $20 million in cap space. So it's a mind-boggling decision to me.
Zach, what are your thoughts? And then I'm going to argue both you guys.
Yeah, I don't get it. I don't get it at linebacker. Christopher Hart is feverishly fighting for him listed as an edge. Let's wait to see that reported before we just assume. If that's the case, I like it a little better. But I'm still not as ecstatic with Drew Sanders, the pick at edge at that spot. I do like it a little better. It's a little easier to wrap my head around because they need the edge help. He's an exciting athlete there. It mitigates some of his react skills. But I think it's been so hard to hit on linebackers recently because it's so hard to for these teams to scout who's a good reader, who is good football instincts. You keep drafting these incredible athletes in the first round. Guys like Drew Sanders. I kind of think maybe that's why he's fallen, because the Drew Sanders of past drafts, like Jamin Davis and whoever else, haven't really worked out. It's been the more instinctive guys. And that's not what I see with Drew Sanders. I see a very not instinctive player, a guy who misreads plays fairly regularly, gets drawn in by, I don't know, the smoke. I'm trying to think of the right word, but gets drawn in by flashy stuff way too frequently. And again, you're talking about a number 3 linebacker. I like the fact that he's adding some more pass coverage ability to the linebacking room, but you could have gotten an awesome offensive tackle that would have helped this team immediately, or an awesome tight end with upside that would have helped this team immediately. It just feels like such a luxury pick to me. I know some people were really high on him and saw the first round talent. I was never there with him. And you have so few premium picks and you're using one of them on a backup at one of the least premium positions. Like, what if at tight end or running back, the guys they would have drafted would have been immediate impact guys. This is probably the least premium pick they could have made, the least value pick they could have made. And I think that's the frustration, because you have so few picks to create value for this team. And this team went 5-12 last year. They really need some value.
I understand that, guys, but I think that we're looking at this completely wrong if we're looking at this 3rd round pick and wanting him to play early. The odds show that this guy probably won't be ready. And then even further than that, the odds show that they'll probably never be ready. That's kind of my issue, is like a lot of these 3rd round picks will never, ever be ready. So you go in there and you take the best player available. And here's the thing. It takes one injury. It takes one guy leaving, for whatever the case may be. And we're looking at this pick like it's genius if he works out. I'm fine with it. I said it before the draft. We're sitting here in the 3rd round. I'm not going to be mad at some of these positions they take. Of course, like if they took kicker or punter or whatever the case may have been, I'm going to be pissed off about that. But I could see
replacing McManus would create more. Replacing McManus would create more value for this roster right now than backing up Jonas Griffith will.
I don't care about that, because the odds show that this guy probably wouldn't be ready anyways. Like, that's just is what it is. They probably wouldn't. We could draft that tackle today. If he played, he would probably suck.
I disagree. You want some contributions from your linebacker, or not from your
my
third round picks.
Who you're moving up for too, though. I think that, or no, you're not moving up. That was Mims.
No. I'm not saying to start. I'm not saying to start. Like, I'm not beating up on the Mims pick because he's not going to start in year 1, but he's going to contribute in year 1. Especially when you don't have any other picks, this team needs help. Like, it'd be nice if you could draft someone that could help. And I don't see it with Drew Sanders. And the other thing is, like, the timeline matters some. Okay, so now you're getting 3 years of a rookie deal. Like that's part of it. Okay, we're drafting this guy who, yeah, we know he won't contribute whatsoever in year one, but we like the upside down the road or whatever. Now you're even getting less value out of that pick because now you're just resigning yourself to only getting 3 years of him on that cheap rookie deal, which isn't appealing either, especially when, again, you're going to add so little youth talent with this class.
Yeah.
So I've got
Go ahead, Frankie. Go ahead.
I've got 3 little notes, but they're not really like bad. They're just kind of notes on this pick. 1, with him being developed as a pass rusher, if that's the way you want to go. Anyone who's been watching me and Joey, you know, I've actually been pretty wanting them to go edge, but I think the biggest thing that I've said about the edge room, they need someone that can set the edge in the run game. They do not need more pass rush specialists, I think is a big part of it. And if you're talking about moving Drew Sanders to the edge, he's going to start out as a pure pass rush specialist, and they do not have that many snaps to go around right now with the people they already have in that room. Secondly, I wonder if this is another example like we saw last year where Vance Joseph is getting in the ear of George Paton and saying, hey, this is my guy, take my guy, take my guy, take my guy, take my guy. And he ends up doing it just like we saw Dwayne Stukes get away with when he was able to talk him into drafting Montrell Washington last year. I wonder if that's a big part of this. And then third,
Vance Joseph, really quick, Frankie, before your third one. Yeah. At least Vance Joseph has an amazing history of developing kind of positional, nebulous, hyper-athletic linebackers where it's hard to figure out, hey, this guy's got to grow a lot and his instincts have to get there, but we love the athlete and you can do so many things with him. When you give a linebacker like that to Vance Joseph, great things are bound to happen.
Okay, that was ridiculous. Frankie.
And then the last
It's a fair point, is it not, Joey? He's had two tries at developing these guys before, and he's struck out horribly. It's more talented prospects at that.
And then the final thought I have, and I think Zach's going to like this one because, I mean, this kind of relates back to what I was saying about Marvin Mims. This pick, again, directly signals to me that this team is not interested in this year and is getting ready to set up insurance things for next season so they can move off of Russell Wilson and whoever else to open up money.
But here's my thing, because I'm on a podcast. Just go ahead, finish, Frankie.
I just don't think you draft a fourth stringer at linebacker because he's right now. It feels like it's obvious he is insurance for when they eventually move off of Josie Jewell or Alex Singleton in a season or two, right? That feels obvious to me.
Yes.
If you're doing that, it tells me that again, this team is just ready to get going on the next phase of Broncos football. They do not want to continue the Russell Wilson era. They are ready to wipe the slate clean. They're saying, let's draft picks that'll help us in 2 years, 3 years, but I'm not really worried about it helping us out this year. And that's totally fine with me, but that is what is happening based on this Drew Sanders pick, in my opinion.
That is the lesson. And here's my other point is that, like, I don't know why we're so stuck on them having to produce right away, because I'm on a podcast with both you guys, and we've both been under the influence that they probably shouldn't. We want the Broncos to rebuild. Yeah. So this has been the conversation this entire offseason.
But then
I'm talking about
it's ridiculous.
I'm talking about no.
Then
this
why
is,
sign Singleton? Why bring back Singleton?
I wasn't expecting. Here's what I'm talking about. Like Greg Dulcich contributed. Like and also that like that's a high watermark. But like Damari Mathis wasn't penciled in to contribute, but then he stepped up, and maybe that's what happens with Drew Sanders. But the expectation, and honestly, I'm taking this from Daniel Jeremiah's Move the Sticks podcast. I know he said in the past, first round picks, you're expected to immediately be a major contributor in year one. Second, third round picks, you like to see some contributions in their first year.
Broncos
but those
are we on the clock? Is this actually true?
Pick is in.
Live pick reaction.
Pick is in.
And the pick is in. They did trade up with the Seahawks.
That's kind of fun. I'm feeling Wanya Morris.
Damn,
I don't know if he went
good. We can't.
DeJuan Jones or Darnell Washington. DeJuan Jones or Darnell Washington, please.
We might slap him in it. I saw it on my stream. That's
they
like
so little draft capital, and they've already traded up twice. That's
no. I don't advocate with the Seahawks. I don't do it. I don't like it. I don't like the way, just like the feelings I'm getting. I don't like. I'm not a fan of the Seahawks trade or this pick. You heard it.
So let's pick a position.
Chat, can you give us a compensation if you see the trade compensation come across, chat? And I'll bet I'm gonna go tight end. I think they want to tight end.
I'm going
to stop Darnell Washington's fall.
Oh my God, Darnell's still on the board, dude. Sean has to do it, right? Like Sean has to.
He's gotta.
He's got
Sean Cook.
Watching him.
I'd actually be really happy about that.
Yeah, shuffle these picks around. I can lie to myself. We'll go back and I can
I love it.
go
But
on
like
some of the
getting
grades.
Darnell, like I was shocked he held off
Wait,
on
what did they
Darnell
give
both
up? What did they
times.
give up? What did they give up?
Anyone see trade
The Broncos
compensation?
traded 108 and a 2024 third round pick. That is a lot. Woo!
Well,
That
no,
is
but they
a
moved
big
up. That's the one they
trade.
moved up. They gave up the third, right?
Traded
Because
number
they
83.
swapped.
The Broncos traded number 83 for one. Wait, what the? Seahawks traded
They
number
got
83
number 83
for the Broncos pick 108 and a 2024 third.
So they're giving up a third to move up almost around
Broncos select
into the
DB
third
Riley
round.
Moss
I don't
from
hate
Iowa.
that.
Hey, that's my guy. Let's go.
Interesting.
Coming from
That's
Brooklyn.
fucking
corner.
awesome. That is awesome. Let's go.
Break it down for us,
Frankie's
Frankie.
film
Break
is
it down
fucking
for
out
us.
here eating this season, boys. Will McDonald top 15. We got Darnell Wright top 10. I've been on ass this season, boys. I've been on ass. So Riley Moss. Sorry, had to get it out
No,
there.
tell us.
This is a lot earlier than he was expected to go. People thought he was going to be
Riley
a late
Moss
fourth
is
rounder.
incredible. Super fluid athlete. Will be incredible playing in like a cover 3 system, a little bit of cover 1 system. He's like 6'2". This is a ridiculous athlete in corner. He's been a really talented player out of Iowa, really talented ball player in the air, ball hawk skills. He ends up getting a lot of breakups and interceptions. I don't have the stats off the top of my head. But I think that is an excellent selection for Denver. I love that they outed to the outside of their secondary. I know Nick Kendall's absolutely jacked as an Iowa Hawkeyes fan himself. Let's go. That's a Frankie's film original right there. We're hyped up on it.
Yep, DB
Damari Mathis to nickel?
Possible. I've been on that hype train as well as Zach Seegers has. This is just to explain to you guys the type of athlete this is. This is a 9.66 on the relative athletic score. 4.45, 40. He's a freak of an athlete. Yeah, I mean, the Broncos definitely needed cornerback depth. I thought that was one of their biggest needs. I still want to see interior defensive line at some point in here. But hey, you know what? You got an outside corner. I think the Broncos absolutely needed it because after Damari Mathis, what are you looking at? It's dry land, nothing. It's a drought. It's a drought for cornerback number 3 out there on the outside. So I'm not mad at it. Frankie's excitement has me excited. So yeah, Zach, what are your initial thoughts?
My thing, I'm going to be honest. I came to my scouting late. I did not get a lot of Riley Moss watching in. To me, I'm a little concerned because you are giving up an extra third round pick to go acquire this guy, kind of middle of the third round. And it looks like, I don't know, he was at least projected to go later. So it's a big swing on it's a big swing on Riley Moss. He's got to become you're spending 2 third-round picks on the guy, or I guess a third and a fourth because you turned that 108 into a third. You're spending a third and a fourth on Riley Moss. So you need him to be a legit corner. It doesn't have to be in year 1. I think they'll be set up with their starters, but because they're set up with their. But hey, I'd expect him to contribute in some ways, at least on special teams. And I don't know. I don't love
believe
it
that when I
face
see it.
value.
Yeah. So D Bronx is in the chat. He says Kliz literally said safety for him, not corner.
There was some talk about
safety.
that around the combine. What did the draft card say, though? Because they could have called him a safety on the draft card if they wanted.
So here's what I will say, and I guess I'm probably kind of drawing back a little bit after the Riley Moss excitement.
Safety, yes.
It feels like, I don't know, maybe you just end up going corner in the third, and then you don't end up having to move up to take Riley Moss. Not trying to be that guy and be super negative, but like this will they probably wouldn't feel the need to move up to go get a boundary corner if they didn't spend their 3rd round pick drafting a 4th string linebacker. So that's a little bit of crappy, but hey, I like the player.
And that's the thing. If you go BPA, but then you're still pressured to fill those needs and spend the pick, it's
not if you're not
necessarily
trying to win
worth
this
the value you're creating.
We can't keep saying that the Broncos aren't trying
but
to
then
win,
why do you give up a third next year?
But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the instant impact point, Joey. I'm not talking about the instant impact.
But they don't have
even if you're trying to rebuild, it's a value point. if you are trying to, it's harder to find corners, as we've talked about. There's certain positions you have to draft high because it's hard to get those guys later on. Certain positions like linebacker you can find later with a lot more ease, right? Something we've talked about. All of a sudden, you draft that linebacker high because he's BPA or whatever. He doesn't have to be an instant impact starter, but now you still have to fill that instant impact role at cornerback because you have no cornerback depth, and now you're forced to lose a future third round pick to fill that hole out of desperation. It's not about Drew Sanders not being an instant impact guy. It's about because you just listened to the board or whatever, you didn't pay attention to need. You're now forced to spend additional draft capital to fill a need when you could have just filled a need in the first place rather than taking a luxury pick.
Aren't we just kind of like if we're looking towards next year, we're looking at the needs of next year?
That's fine.
How many developmental off-ball linebackers are in the 5th round or the 6th round? Developmental off-ball linebackers are not hard to come by.
Yeah, but you're missing the point that they really don't like. They like this guy. It's not just developmental off-ball linebacker. It's that we really think that this guy is fucking good.
Is it we or is it fans?
Like, it's not just like, hey, yeah, you know what? If he turns into something, he turns into something. It's
if they had a dramatically better, then why not take him? Then why not take him with the Mims pick? If they were ecstatic with him, if they had such a high grade on him, if he was such a value at this luxury position that they didn't really need, why wasn't he the guy they traded up for?
Because, bro, they traded up for Marvin Mims. They really like Marvin Mims. But you guys can't just say that. Like, what if there isn't a corner that they liked?
But guess what? These GMs like every pick. If the barometer is, does the GM like their own pick and their own process, then let's give every team an A. Sometimes these GMs do things that are super questionable.
I can't get on the same page with you guys just because it's the 3rd round. We're in the first or second. Yes, I'm right there with you.
My biggest issue is giving up the next year 3, just because that could end up being like the 68th overall pick with how the team has played recently. Like,
yes, before the round.
I don't see the team having made that big of a difference where I see them being like, oh man, that 3rd round pick's going to be in the 80s or the 90s. Like, I don't think the team's there yet. I think it's going to be a fairly valuable 3rd rounder again. And like, that's the only thing where it's like, I get it. I get that they probably liked Drew Sanders and Riley Moss so much, but
I have more issue with the Riley Moss one. If I'm being
I guess I do as well. And now that mainly because there's guys like a Corey Trice from Purdue still available. There's, again, this corner class. I mean, we talked about it all draft season. Corner class is so deep this year. And I know, like, I can probably say that about every position when they move up, like, oh, they could have just waited for one of these other guys. But like, I legitimately think they could have. Like, I don't know, man. Like, what? Yeah. Very.
When the Broncos aced the 2021 draft, and they aced it, best draft in the NFL, they did incredibly well relative to the consensus mock draft boards, the media consensus boards. They picked up a tons of surplus value at just about every single pick. In 2022, when they kind of struck out, and I mean, I think it's too early to really put in a hard verdict on that draft, but it's definitely looking shaky. They got a lot of shaky value, a lot of kind of reaches and whatnot on the media consensus boards. So far, this draft much more closely mimics the 2022 class than it does the 2021 class. And that's my concern.
Cool. Well, guys, I think we had a really good podcast. It went 34 minutes. I think
it went too long. We got surprised with the 3rd pick, though.
Too long. That was wonderful.
But anyways, guys, where can they find your amazing work? I say we argue about it on the timeline so everyone gets to see this argument. Let's stir up some fake beef on the timeline. Anyways, Frankie, where can they find your work, man?
Frankie's Film. I'm posting like all the film of players. You know, I'll be watching every Broncos pick over the next 2 days. I'm going to be doing what I did for free agency and locking myself in a room so you guys will get some great Marvin Mims and Drew Sanders and Riley Moss highlights over the next few days. And then Irish NFL Show. I'm over there every Thursday interviewing some awesome guests, talking with the guys and the lady, and it's a really good time. Make sure you're checking that out. I'm running their Twitter tonight for the draft. And Let's Talk Broncos podcast every Thursday with Joey.
Yes, sir. Zach, where can they find your work, man?
Man, just the buff stuff over at milehighsports.com. But if you're watching this right now, you're probably watching it on the Let's Talk Broncos Twitter or YouTube. Please go over to our YouTube and give us a like, subscribe, all the people in the chat, please hit us with a like. It really helps us out. Exciting stuff happening over on the YouTube very, very shortly. Head over there to see it and be a part of it. Thank you so much for hosting this, Joey. It was a fun time.
This was fun.
A good one.
Yeah, and everyone follow me at JR Drafts. Like, echo everything Zach said. Make sure you're subscribed to the Let's Talk Broncos YouTube, everything like that. The Let's Talk Broncos Twitter is like been a content hub recently, so I hope you guys are following that. But until next time, guys, go Broncos.